Today we're pulling back the curtain on 5 coffee brands that have been sitting in British cupboards for decades, trusted without question, consumed without hesitation. But what if everything you believed about your morning cup was built on lies? What if the brands that promised quality, purity, and that perfect wake-up call were actually delivering something far darker? For generations, the British public has been told that a morning coffee is harmless, essential even, a comforting ritual to start the day. They sold us on convenience, on instant gratification, on the idea that speed and simplicity were progress. But nobody stopped to ask what we were trading away in return. Nobody questioned what was really being poured into those jars, those tins, those brightly coloured packets. The corporations convinced us that their version of coffee, mass-produced, chemically treated and engineered for shelf life, was just as good as the real thing. Better, even, because it was faster, cheaper and always available. Fast forward to today, and we're starting to see the cracks, stories of contamination, deceptive labelling, and ingredients that have no place in a product as simple as coffee. Because coffee should be simple. It should be roasted beans, ground up and brewed. That's it. But the coffee on British supermarket shelves today has become something else entirely. A cocktail of additives, bulking agents, artificial flavors, and in some cases, substances so alarming that entire batches have been pulled from stores. And yet, we keep buying them. Why? Because the brands are familiar, because the price is low, because we've been conditioned to believe that if it's on the shelf, it must be safe. But safe doesn't mean pure, and familiar doesn't mean honest. So let's dive into the 5 UK coffee brands that have quietly betrayed the trust of millions. Brands that wrap themselves in cozy imagery and friendly slogans while delivering products that range from disappointing to downright dangerous. If you've ever felt something was off about your supermarket coffee, drop a comment below. Let's talk about what we've all been drinking without knowing. Number 1. Kenco. Kenco, the name that's been in British households since 1923. A brand built on heritage, quality, and the promise of a proper cup of coffee. For decades, Kenco was the go-to choice for families across the UK. The ads were warm, inviting, almost patriotic. They positioned Kenco as the coffee you could trust, the coffee that understood British taste, the coffee that belonged in your home. But peel back the marketing, and the reality is far less comforting. Kenco, like so many other mass-market brands, has become a victim of its own success. As demand grew, so did the pressure to cut costs, speed up production, and maximize profits. And somewhere along that journey, quality became negotiable. Let's start with the ingredients. Pick up a jar of Kenco Smooth, one of their most popular instant coffees, and you'll notice something strange. It's not just coffee, it's coffee mixed with chicory. Now, chicory isn't necessarily harmful, but it's a filler. A bulking agent used to stretch the product. To make less coffee, go further. It's cheaper than actual coffee beans, and it alters the flavor profile completely. Chicory gives a bitter, earthy taste that masks the true quality, or lack thereof, of the coffee itself. In other words, you're not drinking pure coffee. You're drinking a blend designed to save the company money while keeping the price high enough to maintain that premium image. And then there's the issue of sourcing. Kenco proudly displays the Rainforest Alliance logo on many of its products, suggesting ethical sourcing and environmental responsibility. But multiple investigations have revealed that the coffee supply chain is far murkier than the branding suggests. Beans often come from farms where labor practices are questionable at best, where workers are paid poverty wages, and where environmental protections are minimal. The certification process itself has been criticized for being too lenient, allowing companies to slap a green logo on their products without making meaningful changes to their practices. But perhaps the most damning issue is the quality of the coffee itself. Independent taste tests have consistently ranked Kenco near the bottom for flavor, aroma, and overall satisfaction. Descriptions like flat, burnt, and chemical are common. Many consumers report a strange aftertaste, a lingering bitterness that doesn't come from quality roasting, but from something else entirely. Some suspect it's the result of over-roasting low-grade beans to hide defects. Others point to the additives and anti-caking agents used to keep the granules from clumping. Kenco used to represent British coffee culture. Today, it represents corporate compromise. A brand that once stood for something real has become just another industrial product, dressed up in nostalgia and sold back to a public that deserves far better. Have you noticed a decline in Kenco's quality over the years, or do you still trust the brand? Let us know in the comments. Number 2. Nescafé. Nescafé, the global giant. The brand that practically invented instant coffee and has dominated kitchen cupboards worldwide for nearly a century. In the UK alone, Nescafé controls a massive share of the instant coffee market. It's everywhere: corner shops, supermarkets, petrol stations, office break rooms. The brand is so embedded in British culture that for many people, Nescafé is synonymous with coffee itself. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Nescafé has spent decades prioritizing convenience and profit over quality and ethics, and the cracks are starting to show. Let's begin with the most shocking scandal, one that should have ended the brand's reputation permanently. In 2018, Nestlé, Nescafé's parent company, was caught in a child labor scandal involving its coffee supply chain. Investigations revealed that children as young as 6 were being used to pick coffee beans on farms that supplied Nestlé. These children were working in dangerous conditions, exposed to harmful pesticides, and denied education. When confronted, Nestlé admitted they were aware of the issue, but claimed it was too difficult to monitor every farm in their supply chain. Too difficult. That was their excuse. A multi-billion-pound corporation couldn't be bothered to ensure that the coffee it sold wasn't harvested by children. And yet, British consumers continued to buy Nescafé by the millions, either unaware of the scandal or choosing to overlook it because the price was right and the brand was familiar. But the ethical failures don't stop there. Nescafé's environmental record is equally troubling. The company has been accused of contributing to deforestation in coffee-growing regions, particularly in Brazil and Vietnam. Large-scale coffee plantations, many of which supply Nestlé, have been linked to the destruction of rainforests, loss of biodiversity, and displacement of indigenous communities. And while Nestlé has made public commitments to sustainability, independent audits have found little evidence of meaningful change. Then there's the coffee itself. Nescafé's instant coffee is made using a process that strips away much of the natural flavor and aroma of the beans. What's left is a concentrated powder that's rehydrated with hot water. To make up for the lost flavor, Nescafé adds artificial flavors, acidity regulators, and anti-caking agents. The result is a product that tastes vaguely like coffee but lacks the depth, richness, and complexity of real brewed coffee. Independent testing has found that Nescafé's instant coffee often contains high levels of acrylamide, a chemical formed during high-temperature roasting. Acrylamide is classified as a probable carcinogen, and while the levels in coffee are generally considered safe, the fact remains that Nescafé's processing methods produce higher concentrations than many competitors. And let's not forget the price manipulation. Nescafé markets itself as an affordable everyday coffee, but in reality, when you break down the cost per cup, it's often more expensive than buying fresh beans and grinding them yourself. You're paying for convenience, yes, but you're also paying for decades of marketing that convinced you this was the only option. Nescafé built an empire on the promise of easy, reliable coffee. But behind the glossy jars and cheerful ads lies a history of exploitation, environmental damage, and a product that's little more than a chemical approximation of what coffee should be. Do you still buy Nescafé? Or have you switched to something better? Share your thoughts below. Number 3. Maxwell House. Maxwell House. Good to the last drop. That slogan has echoed through British living rooms for generations. It's warm, reassuring, almost poetic. The kind of phrase that makes you feel like you're part of something timeless, something wholesome. But marketing slogans are designed to sell feelings, not facts. And the facts about Maxwell House tell a very different story. Maxwell House is owned by Kraft Heinz, one of the largest food conglomerates in the world, and like all massive corporations, Kraft Heinz is laser-focused on one thing: maximizing profit. Quality, ethics, and consumer health are secondary considerations at best. Maxwell House is a textbook example of how a once-respected brand can be hollowed out and turned into a vehicle for cheap, mass-produced coffee that prioritizes shelf life over satisfaction. Let's start with the beans. Maxwell House uses a blend of Arabica and Robusta beans, but the ratio is heavily skewed toward Robusta. Why? Because Robusta is cheaper. It grows faster, requires less care, and produces higher yields. But it also tastes harsher, more bitter, and contains roughly twice the caffeine of Arabica. That might sound like a bonus, but the trade-off is a cup of coffee that's more about jolt than enjoyment. The bitterness is so pronounced that Maxwell House has to rely on heavy roasting and added flavors just to make the product palatable. And then there's the contamination issue. In 2020, Maxwell House faced a recall in the United States after consumers reported finding plastic and metal fragments in their coffee. While the recall didn't extend to the UK, it raised serious questions about quality control across the brand's global production facilities. How does foreign material end up in coffee? What kind of factory conditions allow plastic and metal to contaminate a product that millions of people consume daily? But perhaps the most troubling aspect of Maxwell House is what it doesn't tell you. The ingredient list on the jar says 100% coffee, but independent lab tests have found traces of pesticides, herbicides, and other agricultural chemicals in the final product. These residues come from the farms where the beans are grown, many of which use intensive chemical treatments to maximize yield. While the levels detected are technically within legal limits, the cumulative effect of consuming these chemicals day after day, year after year, is still largely unknown. And let's talk about freshness, or the lack thereof. Maxwell House coffee sits in warehouses, on trucks, and on store shelves for months, sometimes over a year, before it ever reaches your cupboard. By the time you open that jar, the coffee inside is stale, oxidized, and stripped of most of its natural oils and aromatics. That's why it tastes flat. That's why it smells more like cardboard than coffee. Real coffee, freshly roasted and ground, is a completely different experience. But Maxwell House has conditioned generations of British consumers to accept mediocrity as the standard. The brand trades on nostalgia, on memories of parents and grandparents drinking it at the breakfast table, but those memories are based on a product that no longer exists. Today's Maxwell House is a shadow of its former self, a corporate product designed for profit margins, not for the people drinking it. Have you been disappointed by Maxwell House? Or do you have a nostalgic attachment to the brand? Let us know. Number 4. Mellow Birds. Mellow Birds. The name itself is meant to evoke softness, comfort, ease. It's coffee for people who don't like coffee, marketed as smooth, gentle, and mild. And for decades, Mellow Birds carved out a niche in the UK market as the friendly alternative to stronger, more assertive blends. But friendly doesn't mean honest, and mild doesn't mean pure. Mellow Birds is not real coffee. Let's be absolutely clear about that. It's a coffee and chicory blend, which means a significant portion of what you're drinking isn't coffee at all. Chicory is a root vegetable that, when roasted and ground, produces a dark, bitter powder that looks like coffee and can be mixed with it to stretch the product. It's cheaper, bulkier, and allows manufacturers to sell you less coffee for the same price. Now, chicory isn't toxic. In fact, it has been used as a coffee substitute for centuries, particularly during times of scarcity. But the key word there is substitute. It's not meant to be blended into coffee and sold as if it's the real thing. Yet that's exactly what Mellow Birds does. The label says coffee, but what you're getting is a hybrid product designed to cut costs and maximize profits. And the taste reflects that. Mellow Birds has a flat, woody flavor with none of the complexity, aroma, or richness you'd expect from real coffee. Many consumers describe it as watery, bland, or slightly sour. That's because chicory alters the flavor profile completely, introducing earthy, bitter notes that mask the coffee's natural characteristics. What you're left with is a beverage that vaguely resembles coffee but lacks any real depth or satisfaction. But the deception doesn't stop at the ingredients. Mellow Birds markets itself as a healthier, gentler option, implying that it's easier on the stomach and suitable for people who find regular coffee too strong. But there's no scientific evidence to support these claims. In fact, chicory can cause digestive upset in some people, leading to bloating, gas, and discomfort. For those with sensitive stomachs, Mellow Birds might actually be worse than regular coffee. And then there's the issue of transparency. The packaging is deliberately vague, using phrases like coffee blend and smooth taste without clearly stating how much of the product is actually coffee. The casual shopper might assume they're buying a lighter roast or a milder blend, not realizing they're paying for a product that's been diluted with a cheap filler. Mellow Birds is a relic of an era when coffee was expensive and chicory was a cost-effective way to make it last longer. But we're not living in post-war Britain anymore. Coffee is widely available, affordable, and higher quality than ever before. There's no excuse for selling bulked-out blends and pretending they're the real thing, yet Mellow Birds continues to sit on supermarket shelves, preying on brand loyalty and consumer ignorance. If you're drinking Mellow Birds, you're not drinking coffee. You're drinking a compromise. And in a world where real coffee is more accessible than ever, there's simply no reason to settle for less. Do you remember drinking Mellow Birds growing up? Would you ever buy it again? Comment below. Number 5. Douwe Egberts. Douwe Egberts. A name that sounds European, sophisticated, trustworthy. The kind of brand that positions itself as a premium choice, a step above the mass-market instant coffees cluttering the supermarket shelves. And for years, many British consumers believed that. They saw the Dutch origins, the elegant packaging, the promises of quality, and they assumed they were getting something special. But assumptions can be dangerous, especially when corporations are involved. Douwe Egberts is owned by JDE Peet's, one of the largest coffee companies in the world. And like all massive conglomerates, JDE Peet's is far more interested in market share and profit margins than in the actual quality of the coffee it sells. Douwe Egberts might wear the costume of a premium brand, but underneath it's cut from the same cloth as every other industrial coffee giant. Cheap beans, mass production, and marketing designed to disguise mediocrity as excellence. Let's start with the sourcing. Douwe Egberts claims to source its beans responsibly, often displaying certifications like UTZ and Rainforest Alliance on its packaging. But, as we've seen time and again, these certifications are far from foolproof. Independent investigations have found that certified farms often fail to meet basic labor and environmental standards. Workers are underpaid. Conditions are unsafe. And deforestation continues unchecked. The logos are there to make you feel good about your purchase, not to guarantee ethical practices. And then there's the taste. Douwe Egberts positions itself as a premium product, but blind taste tests tell a different story. Consumers frequently describe it as harsh, burnt, and lacking in aroma. The coffee has a flat, one-dimensional flavor that suggests low-quality beans and over-roasting. And that's because Douwe Egberts, like most mass-market brands, uses a blend of beans from multiple sources, prioritizing cost and consistency over flavor and freshness. The result is a product that tastes the same every time, not because it's high quality, but because it's engineered to a formula that eliminates nuance and character. But perhaps the most troubling issue with Douwe Egberts is the contamination scandal that rocked the brand in recent years. In 2022, batches of Douwe Egberts instant coffee were recalled in several European countries, including the UK, after reports of mold contamination. Mold in coffee is not just unpleasant, it can produce mycotoxins, harmful compounds that have been linked to liver damage, immune suppression, and even cancer. The fact that moldy coffee made it through quality control and onto store shelves raises serious questions about the brand's manufacturing standards. And let's not forget the price. Douwe Egberts is positioned as a premium brand, and it's priced accordingly. But when you compare it to genuinely high-quality coffee, freshly roasted beans from specialty roasters, or even mid-tier brands with transparent sourcing, Douwe Egberts falls short on every metric. You're paying for the illusion of quality, not the reality. The brand has built its reputation on European heritage and sophisticated branding, but strip away the marketing, and what you're left with is just another mass-produced instant coffee, no better, and in some cases worse, than the budget options it pretends to surpass. Douwe Egberts is a reminder that packaging and price tags don't guarantee quality. In fact, they're often used to distract from the lack of it. The British public deserves transparency, not theatre. And until brands like Douwe Egberts start prioritising honesty over image, they'll remain just another disappointment in a jar. Have you ever been fooled by premium branding? Let's hear your experiences in the comments. So, what do all these brands have in common? They've all traded quality for convenience, ethics for profit, and transparency for marketing. They've convinced us that coffee should be instant, cheap, and always available. But in doing so, they've stripped away everything that makes coffee special. Real coffee is a living product. It starts as a cherry on a tree, grown in soil, enriched by nature, harvested by hand, processed with care, roasted to bring out its unique flavors, and brewed fresh to release its full aroma. Every step of that journey matters. Every decision, from the farm to the cup, shapes the final experience. But the brands we've discussed today have reduced that journey to a factory formula. They've turned coffee into a commodity, a product optimized for shelf life, not for satisfaction. And the British public has paid the price. We've been conditioned to accept mediocrity. We've been told that instant coffee is just as good as fresh. That convenience is worth more than quality, that a jar of granules is the same as a bag of beans. But it's not. It never was. And deep down, we all know it. The saddest part is that real coffee, the kind our grandparents would have recognized, is still out there. Small roasters across the UK are producing exceptional coffee from ethically sourced beans, roasted in small batches and sold fresh. These coffees taste nothing like the industrial sludge we've been drinking for decades. They're complex, vibrant, and full of character. And they're not even that expensive. In fact, when you calculate the cost per cup, freshly ground coffee often works out cheaper than the instant jars we've been overpaying for. But breaking free from these brands requires effort. It requires questioning the familiar, challenging the convenient, and making a conscious choice to demand better. Because as long as we keep buying Kenco, Nescafé, Maxwell House, Mellow Birds, and Douwe Egberts, the corporations will keep producing them. They'll keep cutting corners, stretching ingredients, and hiding behind slick marketing. They have no reason to change as long as the money keeps flowing in. If you're ready to ditch these brands and try real coffee, drop a yes in the comments. Let's start a movement. So, what's the alternative? How do you navigate a supermarket aisle full of deceptive labels and corporate lies? Here are a few simple steps. First, buy whole beans. If you're buying pre-ground coffee, you're already starting from a disadvantage. Coffee begins to lose its flavor within minutes of being ground. Whole beans stay fresh far longer. Invest in a simple grinder, even a cheap manual one will do, and grind your coffee just before brewing. The difference in taste is staggering. Second, look for transparency. Real coffee brands will tell you where the beans come from, who grew them, and how they were processed. If a brand is vague about its sourcing, that's a red flag. Transparency costs nothing except honesty, and the fact that so many brands avoid it tells you everything you need to know. Third, support local roasters. The UK is home to hundreds of small, independent coffee roasters who are passionate about quality and ethics. They're not trying to dominate the market, they're trying to make great coffee. Buy from them. Visit their shops. Ask questions. These are the people who still care about what coffee should be. Fourth, educate yourself. Learn what good coffee tastes like. Try different origins, different roasts, different brewing methods. Once you experience real coffee, you'll never go back to the instant jars. You'll wonder how you ever settled for so little. And finally, vote with your wallet. Every time you choose a small roaster over a corporate giant, you're sending a message. You're telling the industry that quality matters, that ethics matter, that we're not willing to settle for chemical approximations and marketing lies. The corporations won't change because they suddenly develop a conscience. They'll change because we force them to. A century ago, coffee was a luxury, a rare treat reserved for special occasions. Today, it's so common that we don't even think about it. We grab a jar off the shelf, boil the kettle, and stir in a spoonful of granules without a second thought. But that convenience came at a cost. We traded quality for speed. We traded ethics for price, and we traded honesty for familiarity. The 5 brands we've discussed today, Kenco, Nescafé, Maxwell House, Mellow Birds, and Douwe Egberts, are not just disappointing products, they're symbols of a broken system. A food industry that prioritizes profit over people, marketing over truth, and convenience over care. They've spent decades convincing us that their version of coffee is good enough. But it's not. It never was. The good news is that we're waking up. Slowly but surely, the British public is starting to ask questions. We're starting to read labels, demand transparency, and seek out alternatives. We're starting to remember that food should nourish us, not just fill us. And coffee, real coffee, should be a joy, not a compromise. So, the next time you reach for that familiar jar, ask yourself, is this really what I want? Or have I just been conditioned to accept it? Because once you taste real coffee, freshly roasted, ethically sourced, and brewed with care, you'll realize what you've been missing. And you'll wonder why you ever settled for anything less. The choice is yours. Keep buying the brands that see you as a profit margin, or start supporting the ones that see you as a person. Keep accepting mediocrity, or start demanding excellence. Keep drinking chemical approximations, or start brewing real coffee. The corporations won't change on their own, but we can change. And when enough of us do, they'll have no choice but to follow. If this video opened your eyes to what's really in your coffee, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're exposing the truth about the food industry, one product at a time. And if you've already switched to better coffee, share your favorite brands in the comments below. Let's help each other find the real thing. Until next time, stay aware, stay sharp, and protect your cup.